What an election. One of the highest votes for the left ever in the history of Ireland. The landlord parties, who in the 1980s could get up to 85% of all votes, reduced to 43% of the vote. An election that has shaken the establishment to their core, that has scared them, but now they're closing ranks and they're going to try and block change. Most people, especially working class people, voted for change in this election. And yet now it looks like we're going to get Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Green Party back in power. Now, people who voted for the Green Party are very fond of recycling. And well done, they've just achieved the recycling of the same old governments that we've had since the foundation of this state. And Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar are boasting in the media about having a rotating Taoiseach. Sure, isn't that what we've already had for the last 70, 80, 90 years? Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. Well, I say, if the landlord parties continue to block the change we need on housing, on health, on inequality, on childcare, then we should do what the French do and get out on the streets. This election has been the third historic election in a row. The election of 2011 saw Fianna Fáil collapse in the cities after they bailed out the banks to the tune of 64 billion. People then turned to the Labour Party, with Eamon Gilmore promising that they'd be different and they'd save us all from austerity. The Labour Party got in and kicked the working class in the face. But Labour were punished. In the election of 2016, their vote absolutely collapsed. And there was a huge vote returned, not only for left-wing parties like Sinn Féin, but also for the radical left, who on the back of the water charges movement had led tens of thousands onto the streets. And this election, 2020, is the third historic election in a row, the third election to rattle the establishment. There's a couple of ways the landlord parties coming out of this election could try and block change. The first is with this so-called grand coalition of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens. Although the interesting thing is that for the first time in history, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael combined don't even have the numbers to form a government. The second way they could have blocked change was to allow the left to form a left minority government, but then just voted down any proposals that government made in the Dáil, just acting as a block and triggering a new election. In their minds, the minds of the right-wing parties, they think that that would demonstrate the failures of the left. But all it demonstrates to us, to working class people, is that those parties are a block on power. Which brings us to the third point. Those parties, the landlord parties, try and lure people into coalition with them. But if there's such a block on progress, if there's such a block on winning the things we need to really change this society, then any coalition with the right is bound to fail. Then there's the fourth way. They'll try and protect the rich. You see, there's not only posh, rich landlord types in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but they populate the rotten, corrupt Irish state. The top judges, the top civil servants, the top generals in the army, the heads of the police force, the people that smeared Maurice McCabe for telling the truth. Those people would use the upper house in the Senate, the Constitution, they'd use the High Court, they'd use whatever blocks they could to try and stop us from, for example, nationalising the 180,000 empty houses across this country and putting people into them, clearing the housing list. You could do that at the stroke of a pen, but the Fianna Fáilers and Fine Gaelers who populate the state machine and the civil service bureaucracy won't want you to do that. In all of these scenarios, there's only one way we'll actually get what we want, and that's to get out on the streets like the French. If there's a left government in power, then by getting out on the streets, you guarantee that the millions of the upper class in the state machine, the civil service, the bureaucracy and the courts will be afraid to block the proposals of that left government, to block progressive legislation, because the people will mobilise on the streets. And if you end up with a right-wing government, well, look at Macron in France. He's faced weeks and weeks and weeks of protests and mass strikes by the French people, and they forced a retreat by a right-wing government. Whoever's in power, our power to mobilise, like we did during the water charges, will guarantee that we get the things we need on housing and healthcare, that we get the change we so desperately want. So I say, if Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael continue to be a bloc on power, we go French.